Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight we bring you a captivating love story between a billionaire CEO and a young woman who never expected her life to change so drastically. It's a tale of rejection, resilience, and a romance that blossoms in the sun. Most unexpected way? Before we begin, please write the name of your city in the comments below. We'd love to know where you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this story after you finish. Your feedback helps us bring you more beautiful tales. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. May this story bring you both excitement and comfort tonight. Margaret pulled her thin blouse away from her skin, trying to get some relief from the heat. The Manila sun was merciless, and every step she took along the crowded sidewalks made her feel like she was melting. In her hands, she clutched a worn brown envelope. Inside were copies of her resume, the last hope she carried with her that day. She had already been rejected 4 times that morning. Each rejection had been almost identical. "Sorry, miss, you need at least 2 years of experience. Unfortunately, you don't qualify. Please come back after you graduate." The polite smiles of the HR officers couldn't hide the cold dismissal in their words. Margaret tried to keep her head high, but inside, her heart was sinking. It hadn't always been this way. It's not long ago. She was the daughter of a wealthy businessman. She grew up in a spacious home with chandeliers, shiny marble floors, and weekend family trips abroad. Her closet was once filled with designer clothes, and she never had to think twice before buying anything she wanted. But when her father's business collapsed, so did their world. The mansion was sold, the cars repossessed, and piece by piece their luxury disappeared. By the time Margaret was 23, even her dream of finishing college was gone. Now she was just another young woman walking the hot streets of Manila, desperately searching for a chance. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since morning, but she couldn't waste her last bills on food. Instead, she stopped at a small roadside eatery and ordered a bottle of water. Digging through her bag, she realized she had only a few coins left. Embarrassed, she half-joked to the vendor, "Do you accept credit card?" The woman behind the counter raised an eyebrow. "This is a carinderia, not a hotel, miss. 5 pesos. Margaret laughed nervously, paid with her coins, and sat on a plastic chair under a weak electric fan. The lukewarm water barely cooled her down, but it was enough to keep her moving. As she looked around, she saw office workers in neat suits walking by, laughing with colleagues, carrying their IDs with pride. Each one of them reminded her of what she had lost. "No," she whispered to herself. "I can't stop here. I have to keep going." She stood up, adjusted her skirt, and walked toward her next destination, an advertising agency a few streets away. The building looked modern and promising, its glass front reflecting the afternoon sun. She stepped inside, the cold air conditioning hitting her face like a blessing. "Good afternoon," she greeted the receptionist with a forced smile. "I'm here to apply. Here's my resume." The receptionist took the envelope, made a call, and after a few minutes, an HR officer entered and invited her to a small meeting room. He scanned her resume quickly, his face expressionless. "Miss Alviga, thank you for applying," he said, his tone polite but final. "Unfortunately, this position requires at least 3 years of experience. And it says here you haven't completed your degree." Margaret's heart pounded. She forced herself to speak. "Yes, sir. Had to stop because of financial problems, but I'm a quick learner. If you could just give me a chance." The man shook his head gently. "I'm sorry. It's company policy. Maybe after you graduate and gain some experience, we can reconsider." Her lips trembled, but she managed to whisper, "Thank you, sir," before leaving the room. Outside, she found a bench and sat down. Her envelope of resumes now felt useless, nothing more than wasted paper. She stared at the sky, now painted with shades of orange as the sun began to set. She had one last company on her list, Fulkerson Prime Realty, one of the biggest firms in the entire city. The thought of walking into that enormous glass tower made her nervous. She was just a girl with no degree, no money, no experience. It was her last chance. Margaret took a deep breath, clutched her envelope tightly, stood up. One more, she told herself. Just one more try. And with that, she started walking toward the building that might change her life forever. The sun had already begun its descent when Margaret arrived at the towering building of Fulkerson Prime Realty. It stood like a monument of steel and glass, its polished surface reflecting the last rays of daylight. The company name, carved in bold silver letters across the front, gleamed as if to remind her how small she was in comparison. Margaret froze. On the sidewalk, for a moment, her confidence slipped away. She remembered how easily she used to step into buildings like this when her father was still rich, ever once doubting that she belonged there. But now, with her worn shoes and wrinkled blouse, she felt like an imposter. Her hands trembled as she clutched the envelope tighter. What if they laugh at me? What if they don't even let me step inside? She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. "No, Margaret," she whispered. "This is your last chance. You can't go home empty-handed." Gathering what little courage she had, she stepped through the large glass doors. The lobby took her breath away. The marble floor sparkled under golden lights, and a chandelier glittered like a cascade of stars. The cool air carried the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers. Men and women in sleek business suits passed by, carrying tablets and speaking confidently into their phones. Margaret felt every pair of eyes on her, though most people didn't even notice her at all. She walked straight to the reception desk, trying to appear calm. "Good afternoon," she said softly, sliding her resume forward. "I'd like to apply for a position." The receptionist, a young woman in a perfectly tailored blazer, gave her a polite but practiced smile. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" Margaret swallowed hard. "No, but I thought maybe I could still leave my application." The receptionist hesitated. She looked at Margaret's worn envelope, then back at her tired face. "Please wait a moment," she said, picking up the phone. Minutes passed like hours. Margaret stood awkwardly by the desk, wishing she could disappear. Just as the receptionist was about to say something, a man's voice suddenly interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Margaret turned around, and her breath caught. Standing before her was a tall man in a blue dress shirt with rolled-up sleeves. His dark hair was neatly styled, his features sharp, and his gaze so intense it seemed to pierce straight through her. He looked nothing like the suited executive she had imagined. Instead, there was something casual yet commanding about him. The receptionist straightened immediately. "Sir Kiden," she exclaimed. Margaret's eyes widened. "Sir Kiden." Man studied her carefully. "What brings you here?" Margaret stammered, her cheeks burning. "I'm here to apply. I know I don't have much experience, but I thought maybe," before she could finish. The man raised his hand gently, not to silence her, but to calm her nerves. "What's your name?" "Margaret." "Margaret Alviga." His eyes lingered on her for a moment longer before he gave a small nod. "Follow me." The receptionist blinked in surprise but said nothing. Margaret, still in shock, obeyed, clutching her envelope tightly as she followed the man across the grand lobby. Entered a private elevator. The silence inside was heavy. Margaret tried to keep her eyes on the floor, but she couldn't help glancing at him. There was something magnetic about his presence, a quiet authority in the way he stood with his hands in his pockets. "You don't know who I am, do you?" he asked suddenly, his voice calm but curious. Margaret's eyes widened again. I heard them call you Sir Kiden." He gave a faint smile. "Kiden Fulkerson, CEO of this company." The envelope nearly slipped from her hands. She stared at him, stunned. The very man who owned this glass empire was standing next to her, casually speaking as if he were no different from anyone else. Her mind raced. The CEO himself. "And I just walked in here without an appointment." Kiden glanced at her, noticing her shock. "Relax," he said simply. "I just want to hear your story." The elevator doors opened, revealing the top floor of the building. He gestured for her to step out first. Heart pounding, Margaret obeyed, knowing that her life was about to take a turn she never could have imagined. The CEO's office was nothing like Margaret had ever seen before. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows opened to a breathtaking view of the Manila skyline. The golden glow of the setting sun spilled into the room, casting warm light across sleek furniture and polished wood. A massive desk sat in the middle, though it was surprisingly uncluttered. Kaiden gestured toward a leather chair across from him. "Please, sit." Margaret's knees felt weak, but she obeyed. She carefully placed her envelope on her lap, gripping it tightly as though it were her lifeline. Kaiden settled into his chair, resting one arm casually on the desk, studying her in silence. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic far below. Finally, he spoke. "Tell me about yourself, Margaret." She blinked. No HR officer had ever asked her that so directly. Her voice trembled as she began. "I'm 23. Years old? I studied business administration at university, but I had to stop in my third year after my father's company collapsed. Since then, I've been trying to support myself. I don't have formal work experience yet, but I'm a fast learner. I'll work hard, sir. You just give me a chance." Her words tumbled out in a rush. She wanted to sound confident, but desperation seeped through every syllable. Leaned back, folding his arms. He didn't interrupt. His dark eyes remained fixed on her, calm yet unreadable. When she finally trailed off, he exhaled slowly. "You're honest, that's rare."
Yes.
Margaret's heart leaped, but only for a second. "But honesty," he continued, "doesn't change the fact that you don't meet the qualifications for any of our positions." The words hit her like a cold slap. She straightened in her chair, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Sir, even as a trainee, I can start at the bottom. I'll prove myself." Kaiden shook his head gently. "I can't bend the rules for you. It wouldn't be fair to the other applicants who were rejected for the same reason." Her throat tightened. She forced a smile, though her eyes burned. I understand. Thank you for your time." She stood, clutching her envelope, ready to leave before the tears spilled. But Kaiden's voice stopped her. "Wait." Margaret froze, turning back slowly. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a tone far quieter than before, he said, "There might be another way I can help you." Her heart skipped a beat. "What? Do you mean—" Kaiden rose from his chair and walked around the desk, standing just a few feet from her. His presence felt overwhelming, commanding yet not hostile. "You're not qualified for a job in this company," he said. "But you could be qualified for something else." Margaret's brows furrowed. "Something else?" His gaze locked onto hers. "I'm offering you an arrangement not as an employee, but as my companion. In exchange, I'll take care of your financial needs. You'll never have to worry about money again." Her breath caught in her chest. She stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You mean you're asking me to be your—" or struggled to say. The words, "your sugar baby." Kaiden didn't flinch. "Yes." The office seemed to spin around her. She gripped the envelope tighter, her pulse racing. She had come here searching for a job. Instead, she had been given an offer that could change her life, but at a price she wasn't sure she was willing to pay. Margaret's mind went blank. The words "sugar baby" echoed inside her head, louder than the ticking of the clock on the wall. She felt as though the ground beneath her had vanished, leaving her suspended in disbelief. "This must be a joke," she whispered, her voice trembling. Todd Kane didn't laugh. His eyes held hers with a calm, unflinching seriousness. "Well, I don't make jokes about things like this." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had prepared herself for rejection, for humiliation even, but not this. It's not an indecent offer from a man she had just met. Worse, the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city. Margaret's hand shook as she clutched the envelope tighter. "Sir, I came here looking for a job, not—" She stopped, her voice cracking. "Not this." Kaiden nodded slightly as if he expected her reaction. "I know, and you're free to walk away. But you should think carefully before you decide. You've told me yourself you have no degree, no work experience, no money left. How many more doors will you knock on before someone finally says yes?" His words cut deep because they were true. She thought of the small coins in her purse, the empty refrigerator back home, the rent she couldn't pay. She thought of her mother, sick with worry, and the shame she felt every time she saw her old classmates living the life she had lost. but still her pride fought back. "Do you think I'm so desperate that I'll just throw away my dignity?" Caden's gaze softened, but his voice remained steady. "I think you're a survivor. And sometimes, survival means making choices you never thought you would."
Silence.
Stretched between them, Margaret's breathing grew uneven. Part of her wanted to scream and storm out. Another part wanted to collapse and cry, to confess how exhausted she was from fighting a battle she kept losing. She imagined herself saying no, walking out of the glass tower and going back to her tiny rented room. She saw herself counting the last of her coins, wondering how long before she had to skip another meal. And then she imagined saying, yes, imagined a life without hunger, without fear of eviction, without rejection at every turn. Her chest ached with the weight of the decision. "Finally," she whispered. "And if I agreed, what would happen?" Kaiden stepped closer, but not too close. His voice lowered. "I would take care of you, your expenses, your needs, everything. In return, I would expect your company, your time, your loyalty." Raced. It was both terrifying and tempting. Her conscience screamed at her to run, but her body felt heavy, rooted by exhaustion and desperation. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she saw her old life, the chandeliers, the marble floors, the feeling of never worrying about tomorrow. When she opened them, she found Kaiden still watching her, waiting. Her voice was barely audible. I don't know if I can do this, but maybe I don't have a choice anymore." Kaiden's expression remained calm, but his eyes flickered with something unreadable. "That's enough for now. Think of this as a trial. No contracts, no commitments yet. Just see where it goes." Margaret's knees felt weak, but she forced herself to nod. Deep down, she wasn't sure if she had just saved herself or signed away something far more precious. The next evening, Margaret sat on the edge of her narrow bed, staring at her cracked phone screen. A new message glowed on it. "Be ready by 7. I'll pick you up." Her stomach twisted into knots. She had barely slept since their conversation. In the office, every time she closed her eyes, Kaiden's offer replayed in her mind. A sugar baby. The words still felt unreal, almost shameful. Yet here she was, smoothing the wrinkles out of her only decent dress, about to step into a life she didn't understand. When the sound of a car horn echoed outside her window, she peeked through the blinds. Sleek black SUV waited at the curb. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her small purse and hurried downstairs. Kaiden himself was behind the wheel, dressed in a simple black suit with no tie. Somehow, his casual elegance made him look even more intimidating. As soon as he saw her, he stepped out and opened the passenger door for her. "Good evening." "Margaret," he said, his tone smooth, unreadable. She swallowed hard. "Good evening." "Sir," he gave a faint smirk. "Call me Kaiden. Like, no need for formalities when it's just the two of us." Blushing, she nodded and slid into the leather seat. The interior smelled of luxury fine leather, a hint of cologne, and the faint hum of the engine that purred like a beast. The drive was quiet at first. Margaret fidgeted with her purse, unsure what to say. Finally, Kaiden broke the silence. "You look nervous," he observed. "I am," she admitted honestly. "I've never done anything like this before." "I know," he replied calmly. "That's why this is a trial. No pressure. So let me show you my world. You can decide later if you want to stay." They drove through the glittering city, skyscrapers glowing against the night sky. Margaret's eyes widened as the car turned into the driveway of a 5-star hotel. Golden lights lined the entrance, and valets rushed forward as Kaiden handed one his keys. Inside the hotel lobby was a palace. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Soft music played in the background, and the air smelled of roses. Margaret felt out of place in her modest dress, but Kaiden walked beside her with such quiet confidence that no one dared question her presence. They dined in a private section of the restaurant, where waiters in white gloves served them plates of food she couldn't even pronounce. Margaret stared at the delicate slices of salmon, the perfectly folded napkins, the tall glasses of wine. "This must cost a fortune," she whispered. Kaiden shrugged lightly. "Money is meant to be used. What matters is who you spend it with. His words unsettled her, but at the same time, a warmth spread in her chest. For the first time in months, she ate until she was full. For the first time since her family's downfall, she felt a glimpse of what life used to be. After dinner, they stepped out onto the balcony, overlooking the city. The skyline glittered like a field of stars. Margaret leaned against the railing, the cool breeze brushing her skin. "It's beautiful," she murmured. Kane stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "You deserve to see beautiful things. You've been through enough." She turned to look at him, her heart skipping. There was no teasing in his tone, no arrogance, just sincerity. For the first time since their strange arrangement began, Margaret felt the walls around her heart soften. She didn't know if she could ever truly accept the role he offered her, as she stood there, bathed in city lights. She couldn't deny one thing. She wanted to see where this path might lead. 2 days later, Margaret found herself standing at the airport, her small overnight bag clutched tightly in her hands. She still couldn't quite believe it. Kaiden had called her the night before, his voice calm but commanding. "Pack lightly. We're leaving tomorrow morning. I want to show you something." Now here she was, surrounded by travelers with expensive luggage and designer clothes, feeling like she didn't belong. Her bag was old, its zipper a little loose, but it was all she had. Kaiden arrived moments later, dressed casually in a white shirt and dark jeans. Yet somehow he looked like he owned the entire airport. People glanced at him as he walked, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "Ready?" he asked simply. Margaret nodded nervously. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," he replied with a hint of a smile. The flight was short, just over an hour, but it felt like a dream. When they landed, Margaret stepped out of the plane and gasped. Before her stretched the coastline of Cebu, blue ocean waves crashing against white sand, palm trees swaying in the breeze and mountains rising in the distance. "Welcome to my getaway," Kaiden said, watching her reaction. "It's breathtaking," she whispered. A private car took them straight to a luxury resort overlooking the sea. Margaret's heart pounded as they entered their villa, complete with glass walls, a private pool, and a balcony that seemed to float above the water. "I've never stayed anywhere like this," she admitted softly. Kane glanced at her. "Get used to it. If you stay with me, there will be more." His words made her chest tighten. Stay with him, could she? That afternoon he took her to the Temple of Leah, a grand structure built in honor of eternal love. As they walked through the marble columns and statues, Margaret found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Kaiden wasn't talking about business or money, he was pointing out carvings, telling her little stories about the place, even making her laugh with his dry humor. At one point, she caught him watching her, his gaze softer than usual. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing," he said, looking away. But his faint smile betrayed him. That evening, they had dinner by the shore. A table was set under the stars, candles flickering in the breeze, the sound of the waves as their background music. Margaret ate slowly, savoring every bite, but more than the food. She was overwhelmed by the intimacy of the moment. When silence stretched between them, Kaiden broke it. I've spent years buried in work. I thought that was enough. But being here with you?" He paused, searching for the right words. "It feels different." Margaret's cheeks warmed. She wasn't sure what to say. Her wanted to remind herself that this was just an arrangement, nothing more. But another part deep down wanted to believe his words. Later, as they walked along the beach, the moonlight silvering the sand, their hands brushed. Margaret stiffened at first, but then, slowly, Kaiden's fingers intertwined with hers. She glanced at him, and for the first time, he wasn't the intimidating CEO or the man who had made that shocking offer. He was just Kaiden, quiet, thoughtful, almost vulnerable. Her heart skipped a beat. For the first time, Margaret wondered if this arrangement could turn into something neither of them had planned, something real. The days in Cebu passed like a dream. For Margaret, time seemed to slow down, as if the ocean waves carried away her worries each morning and brought her peace with every sunset. On the second day, Kaiden suggested they explore the hills. Private driver brought them to the Cebu Tups, a viewing deck that overlooked the entire city. The wind was cool up there, and the panorama stretched endlessly, the glittering sea on one side, the dense sprawl of the city on the other. Margaret leaned against the railing, her hair catching the breeze. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. Kaiden stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Yes, it is." When she turned, she caught him looking at her, not the view. Her chest tightened, and she quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the horizon. They spent the afternoon wandering through narrow streets lined with local shops. Margaret's eyes sparkled as she admired handmade trinkets, though she never dared to touch anything. She still felt the sting of her empty wallet, even if Kaiden paid for everything. But Kaiden noticed. Without a word, he slipped away into a small jewelry stall. When he returned, he held a tiny box. "For you," he said simply. Margaret blinked in surprise. "What?" "No, I can't open it," Kaiden insisted. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small star-shaped pendant. The metal glinted softly in the sunlight. Margaret's throat tightened. "It's beautiful, but why?" Kaiden's voice was calm, but his eyes softened. "Consider it a welcome gift. A reminder that you're not alone anymore." She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. For months, she had felt invisible, just another rejected applicant, another forgotten face in the crowd. But in that moment, she felt seen. Truly seen. With shaky hands, she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Kaiden gave the faintest smile. "Get used to it. This is only the beginning." That night, back at the villa, Margaret couldn't stop staring at the bracelet. Every time the silver caught the light, her heart swelled with warmth. She told herself it was just a gift, nothing more. But deep inside, she knew it meant something else, something she wasn't ready to admit. The following morning, Kaiden surprised her again. Instead of meetings or phone calls, he left his laptop closed and joined her for breakfast by the pool. He listened as she told him small stories from her childhood, how she used to sneak cookies from the kitchen, how she once dreamed of becoming a painter. He laughed softly, and for the first time, Margaret saw the weight of his CEO persona melt away. In those quiet hours, Kaiden wasn't the billionaire tycoon. He was just a man. And Margaret, against her better judgment, found herself falling for him, one laugh, one glance, one shared moment at a time. By their third night in Cebu, the air between Margaret and Kaiden had shifted. What had started as an arrangement, a strange, almost unthinkable offer, was beginning to feel like something else entirely. That evening, Kaiden invited her to a private dinner on the beach. The staff had set up a simple wooden table in the sand, lit only by lanterns and candles. The ocean stretched before them, waves lapping gently at the shore. While the stars burned brightly above, Margaret wore a soft blue dress Kaiden had bought her earlier that day. It wasn't extravagant, but when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. For the first time in months, she didn't look like a desperate girl clinging to survival. She looked radiant. "You look beautiful," Kaiden said when she arrived, his tone free of the usual restraint. Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself." Dinner was light grilled seafood, fresh fruit, and a bottle of wine that Kaiden poured for both of them. Margaret ate slowly, savoring each bite, but she found herself distracted by the way he watched her. Not with the sharp eyes of a CEO, but with something gentler, almost vulnerable. After the meal, they walked barefoot along the water's edge. The sand was cool beneath their feet, and Margaret lifted her dress slightly to keep it from dragging in the surf. Kaiden walked beside her, his hands in his pockets, unusually quiet. Finally, she broke the silence. "You're different here." Glanced at her. "Different how?" "You're lighter. You laugh more. You don't seem like the Keaton Fulkerson everyone fears in the city." His lips curved faintly. "Maybe that's because, for once, I don't have to be. Her heart skipped. She looked away, staring at the endless horizon. I still don't understand why you chose me. Out of all the people you could have. Kaiden stopped walking, forcing her to halt too. His gaze held hers, steady and intense. Because you don't see me as just a CEO. You talk to me like a person. That's rare. Margaret swallowed hard, her chest tightening. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The ocean roared softly behind them, the only witness to the tension building between them. Then Kaiden stepped closer. Margaret. His voice was low, almost a whisper. She froze, her pulse racing. I know this wasn't what you expected, he said. It wasn't what I expected either. But these last few days with you, they felt more real than anything I've had. In years, her breath hitched. Kaiden. Before she could say more, he leaned down, closing the distance. His lips brushed hers gently at first, as if asking permission. She stiffened, torn between fear and longing, but then, slowly, she melted into the kiss. It wasn't rushed or demanding. It was tender, lingering, full of unspoken promises. When they finally pulled apart, Margaret's cheeks were flushed, her heart thundering. She searched his face, trying to read the emotion in his eyes. Does this mean, she began softly, that this is more than just an arrangement? Kaiden cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly against her skin. It means I don't want to pretend anymore. Her chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. For the first time since her world had collapsed, she allowed herself to believe in something bigger than survival. And it all began with a kiss under the stars. The return to Manila was like waking from a dream. The moment their plane touched down, the carefree days of Cebu seemed to fade into memory. Margaret pressed her forehead against the car window as the city's endless traffic and noise swallowed them once again. Kaiden sat beside her in the back seat, scrolling through his phone. His jaw was tense, his brow furrowed, as message after message lit up his screen. Meetings, deadlines, negotiations. His world was calling him back. Margaret's chest ached. Just a night ago, he had kissed her under the stars and whispered words. That felt real. But here, surrounded by the steel and glass of Manila, he looked like the untouchable CEO again. When they reached her apartment, Kaiden stepped out first and opened her door. Rest for now, he said gently. I'll call you, she nodded, forcing a smile, though doubt gnawed at her. Will he really call? Or was Cebu just a temporary escape for him? The following days confirmed her fears. Kaiden was swallowed whole. By his empire. He left early, returned late, and sometimes disappeared for days without a word. When he did call, it was brief, his voice tired. Margaret tried to be patient, reminding herself that he was a man with responsibilities far greater than she could imagine. But as she sat alone in her small room, staring at the bracelet he had, given her doubts crept in. Was I just a distraction for him, something to occupy his loneliness for a few days? She thought back to his offer in the office, an arrangement. What if that was all it would ever be? A transaction dressed up as affection one night. She decided to surprise him. Gathering her courage, she went to the Fulkerson Prime Realty building. The lobby was just as intimidating as the first time she had walked in, but this time she had a different purpose. The receptionist looked startled but recognized her. Miss Alviga, do you have an appointment? Margaret shook her head. No, but please, just tell him I'm here. After a tense wait, the elevator doors opened, and Kaiden appeared, flanked by two executives. His expression shifted the moment he saw her. Margaret, he said sharply, his tone more formal than she had ever heard. She froze. The Kaiden who had kissed her in Cebu was nowhere to be found. This was the CEO, every inch of him cold and commanding. The executives excused themselves, leaving the two of them alone. Kaiden sighed, loosening his tie as he approached her. Why are you here? Margaret swallowed hard. I just wanted to see you. It's been days. I thought maybe Margaret. His voice softened, but his eyes remained weary. This world isn't like Cebu. I can't just walk away from it whenever I want. Her throat tightened. Then what am I to you? It's just an escape, a temporary distraction. He looked at her for a long moment, then reached out, brushing his fingers gently across her bracelet. You're more than that. But you have to trust me. This what we have, it's real, even if I can't always show it. Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but the walls of the skyscraper around them felt colder than the waves of Cebu had ever been warm. Still, when he pulled her into a quiet embrace, she let herself lean against him. For now, she chose to believe. But deep down a whisper of doubt lingered. How long could their fragile love survive in a world built on power and pressure? Margaret soon realized that Manila was far less forgiving than Cebu. In Cebu, she had been just a girl enjoying the beach beside a man who cared for her. But here, in the glass towers and crowded streets, she was the girl with the CEO, and everyone noticed when Kaiden invited her to lunch near his office. She felt the stares before they even sat down. The restaurant was filled with professionals in suits, many of whom recognized Kaiden immediately. Their eyes slid to Margaret. Studying her cheap handbag, her nervous posture, her modest dress, whispers rippled through the room like waves. Who is she? She doesn't look like a business partner. It's probably just another girl. Margaret's hands trembled around her fork. She tried to focus on the food, but every hushed voice pierced her like a blade. Kaiden, of course, seemed unfazed, carrying on with calm conversation, but Margaret couldn't shake the heat of humiliation creeping up her neck. When they left, she asked quietly, "Do you hear them? The things they say about me?" Kaiden looked at her seriously. "Yes, and I don't care. But I do," she whispered. "They see me as nothing, as someone who doesn't belong with you." He reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly. "Let them talk. I didn't choose them. I chose you." His words comforted her for a moment, but she knew that whispers, if ignored, could grow into storms. She was right. Within weeks, the murmurs reached higher places. At a board meeting, one of Kaiden's senior partners made a pointed remark about distractions. Another raised concerns about the company's image. Even his father, recovering from surgery abroad, called to express disapproval. "You're the head of a billion-dollar company, Kaiden." His father's voice thundered through the phone. "Your personal choices reflect on us all. A woman with no degree, no background, what will people think?" Kaiden clenched his jaw. "They'll think it's my life and my decision." "Don't be naive," his father snapped. "Shareholders don't care about your heart. They care about stability. If you continue down this path, you'll invite scrutiny we can't afford." When the call ended, Kaiden leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. For the first time in years, the weight of his empire felt heavier than ever. Meanwhile, Margaret wasn't blind to the pressure either. At the Fulkerson lobby, she once overheard two assistants talking. "She's pretty, but she's no match for him." "Exactly, she's just a phase. He'll get bored soon." The words sliced through her. That night, alone in her apartment, she stared at the silver bracelet around her wrist. She wanted to believe it meant something. She wanted to believe Kaiden's kiss under the stars was real. But doubt gnawed at her, relentless. When Kaiden finally arrived late that evening, exhaustion etched on his face, she couldn't stop herself from asking, "Am I making things harder for you? For your company? For your family?" He looked at her in surprise, then frustration. "Who told you that?" "No one had to," she whispered. "I see it. I hear it." Kaiden cupped her face, his voice low but fierce. Margaret listened too. "Me, you are not a burden. You are not a mistake. They can say whatever they want, but I won't let them decide what's real for me." Her eyes burned with tears. She wanted to believe him so badly, but fear lingered. Feared that one day, the pressure would become too much. She would be the first thing he let go. And for the first time since meeting Kaiden, Margaret wondered, was love strong enough to stand against an empire? The invitation arrived on Kaiden's desk with a golden seal. The annual Business Leaders Gala, a glittering event where Manila's most powerful figures gathered. Attendance was not optional for a man like Kaiden, it was expected. When Margaret first saw the envelope, her stomach dropped. "You're going to this?" "Yes," Kaiden replied, adjusting his tie. "And you're coming with me?" Her eyes widened. "Kaiden, no. I can't. Everyone will be there. They'll talk." He met her gaze firmly. They already are. Let them. Margaret's heart raced. She imagined stepping into a ballroom filled with millionaires and politicians, all of them staring at her with thinly veiled judgment. She wanted to refuse, but Caden's tone left no room for argument. The night of the gala, Margaret stood before the mirror in a gown Caden had chosen for her, deep emerald dress that clung perfectly to her figure with a slit that made her blush every time she looked down. Her hair had been styled by a professional, her face painted lightly with makeup that made her look like someone else entirely. When Caden entered the room, dressed in a sleek black tuxedo, he paused, his eyes softening. "You're stunning," Margaret's cheeks flushed. "I feel like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." We stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "No, you're showing them the person I already see." The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and crystal glasses. The moment they arrived, all eyes turned. Conversations faltered and whispers spread like wildfire. "Is that her? The girl? She doesn't belong here?" Margaret clung to Caden's arm, her pulse hammering in her ears. Every glance felt like a dagger, every smile like a sneer. She wanted to disappear, but Caden held her close, his presence steady, his confidence unshaken. He introduced her to partners, investors, politicians. Some offered polite smiles. Others barely concealed their disdain. Margaret forced herself to smile, to shake hands, to play a role she wasn't sure she could carry. During dinner, she overheard two women at the next table whispering. She was nothing before him. Just another desperate girl. It won't last. These things never do. Her fork trembled in her hand, wanted to flee, to rip off the bracelet on her wrist and prove them wrong somehow. But Caden placed his hand gently over hers under the table, steadying her. After the speeches, as the music began, Caden stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." Margaret hesitated. Everyone's watching. Then let them watch. On the dance floor, beneath the chandeliers, Caden led her in a slow waltz. His hand rested firmly on her back, his eyes never leaving hers. For a moment, the whispers faded, the room blurred, and all she saw was him. "You belong here," he murmured with me. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that one dance could silence the world. But when the music ended, the applause was polite, the whispers louder than ever. And as they left the floor, Margaret knew one thing with certainty. Tonight had not silenced the critics. It had only made their voices sharper. The morning after the gala, Margaret woke up to the vibration of her phone. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen, messages, missed calls, and endless social media tags. Her heart sank before she even opened them. The headlines were merciless. "Who is the mystery girl on Caden Fulkerson's arm?" From rags to riches, a nobody at the gala CEO's date raises eyebrows. Is she worthy of the spotlight? Some posts were crueler. Photos of her at the event circulated with captions mocking her background, her past, even the way she held Caden's arm. Strangers dug into her family's bankruptcy, her unfinished degree, painting her as a gold digger who had clawed her way into the billionaire's life. Margaret's chest tightened with every word. She dropped the phone on the bed as tears filled her eyes. When Caden arrived at her apartment later that morning, he found her curled up on the couch, the bracelet he'd given her clutched tightly in her hand. "They hate me," she whispered, her voice broken. "Everyone hates me. They think I'm nothing. Just some girl who tricked her way into your life." Caden sat beside her, his jaw tense. He picked up her phone, scrolling through the headlines, his expression growing darker with each one. "Margaret," he said firmly, "you are not what they say. You're more than that. More than any of them will ever understand." But Margaret shook her head. "You don't see it, Caden. This doesn't hurt you the way it hurts me. You have power, respect. No one questions your place. But me, I'm the weak link. And now, because of me, they're attacking you too." Her words struck deep. Caden knew she wasn't entirely wrong. The board had already sent him messages, subtle warnings about the image problem he was creating. Shareholders were restless. Even his father had called again, furious about the headlines that night. Kaiden sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights beyond the glass. His phone buzzed constantly with calls he didn't answer. Inside, a war raged. If he spoke, publicly defended Margaret, he would legitimize their relationship, but he would also fuel the fire, making her an even bigger target. If he stayed silent, the storm might fade. But at the cost of letting the world believe their lies, Deborah, his trusted secretary, finally stepped in. "Sir, if you don't address this, it will only grow. People want clarity." Back, rubbing his temples, clarity or blood. "Sometimes they're the same," she replied softly. Meanwhile, Margaret sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the comments despite knowing it would hurt. One caught her attention. She, never last. He'll throw her away when the pressure gets too high. Her stomach twisted. What if they were right? What if Kaiden chose silence not because it was strategic, but because she wasn't worth the fight? She stared at the bracelet on her wrist, the star-shaped pendant glinting faintly in the dim light. She wanted to believe it meant something. More. But with each passing hour of Kaiden's silence, her hope began to waver. And somewhere in the city, Kaiden stood at a crossroads, torn between protecting the empire he had built and protecting the woman who had begun to mean more to him than he ever thought possible. The press conference was not planned, it was commanded. Reporters had camped outside Fulkerson Prime Realty for days, hungry for answers. Every time Kaiden appeared in public, cameras flashed, microphones shoved toward him. Each time, he brushed them off with silence. But silence had only made the storm louder, so. One morning, Kaiden walked into the company auditorium, the press already gathered. Cameras rolled. The room buzzed with tension, the air sharp with expectation. Margaret, watching from backstage with Deborah, gripped her bracelet so tightly her knuckles turned white. Kaiden stepped onto the podium. Tall and composed, his eyes scanning the crowd. For a moment, he let the silence stretch, and he spoke. "You've all been asking questions," he began, his voice steady. "About me. About the woman you've seen by my side." The flashes intensified. Reporters leaned forward. "Yes." Kaiden continued. "Her name is Margaret Ulvaga. She is not a socialite. She is not a politician's daughter.
Ow!
She is not what you think she is." The room erupted, questions shouted, pens scribbling, but Kaiden raised a hand, commanding silence once again. "She is simply a woman I chose, and I will continue to choose her, no matter what you say, no matter what you write." Margaret's breath caught. Her eyes blurred with tears. He leaned closer to the microphone. "You want clarity? Here it is. Margaret is with me. She is not temporary. She is not a scandal. She is part of my life, and I will not tolerate anyone who treats her otherwise." Gasps rippled across the room. Cameras clicked furiously. From the sidelines, Deborah whispered, "He just set fire to his own kingdom." The fallout was immediate. News outlets ran headlines within minutes. Kaiden Fulkerson defends mystery woman. Public confession shocks business world. Billionaire CEO chooses love over legacy. Some praised his courage. Others ridiculed him. Shareholders raged. Worried about the company's image? His father's furious voice thundered over the phone that night. "You've doomed us all for a girl." But Kaiden didn't waver. He turned off the phone, locked his office, and drove straight to Margaret's apartment. When she opened the door, her eyes were red, her cheeks damp from crying. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "Because it was the truth," he answered. Simply. "But now they'll come after you," she said, voice trembling. "Your family, your investors, they'll hate me even more." Kaiden stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. "Let them. I've fought battles my whole life, business rivals, greedy shareholders, the weight of an empire. None of it mattered but you." His voice broke, softer now. "You matter."
Accurate.
Tears spilled freely. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was making a mistake. But instead, she collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest. For the first time, she felt not like a secret, not like an arrangement, but like someone truly chosen. And for Kaiden, it was the first time he had risked everything, not for profit, not for power, but for love. The days following Kaiden's declaration were nothing short of chaos. Margaret could hardly step outside without a camera flashing in her face. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment, hurling questions that stung like stones. Are you using him for money? Do you really think you belong by his side? What's your endgame, Margaret? She tried to keep her head down, but every word sliced her deeper. Once, she tripped while trying to push past the reporters, and a photographer laughed as he snapped the photo. The image appeared online the next day with the caption, "Clumsy gold digger." Her world shrank to the four walls of her tiny apartment. Even the bracelet on her wrist, once a symbol of hope, felt heavy under the weight of ridicule. Meanwhile, Kaiden faced a battlefield of his own. At the next board meeting, tension hung like a storm cloud. Shareholders glared across the polished table, their patience at its end. "You've jeopardized the company's reputation," one barked. "Our stocks dipped 3 points after your little speech," another hissed. "Your personal life is bleeding into your business, Kaiden. This girl is a liability." Kaiden leaned forward, unflinching. "Margaret is not a liability. She is my choice. My personal life is not up for negotiation." The room erupted in protest. One elderly director slammed his fist on the table. "If you continue this madness, you'll drag us all down with you." Kaiden's voice turned icy. "Then step aside. If the price of keeping this company afloat is denying my own life, I'll walk away before I let that happen." His words silenced the room. But the battle was far from over. At home, things were no easier. His father's voice over the phone grew harsher by the day. "You've disgraced this family," the old man spat. "Do you think legacy is built on love? No, it's built on sacrifice. And if you can't understand that, you're unfit too." Lead Kaiden ended the call without replying. But Margaret noticed how his shoulders sagged afterward, how he stared out the window longer than usual, silent and pained. One night, Margaret broke down. As Kaiden entered her apartment, she stood in the middle of the room, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this to yourself?" she cried. "They hate me, Kaiden. Your shareholders, your family, the media, everyone. They'll never accept me. And you'll lose everything because of me." He stepped toward her, but she pulled back, shaking her head. "Maybe I should. Walk away. Maybe that's the only way to protect you." For the first time, Kaiden's mask cracked. His voice trembled, raw with desperation. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare think leaving me would solve anything." She looked at him, broken. "Then what do we do? How do we survive this?" He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "We fight. Together. That's how." Margaret's chest heaved with sobs, but slowly she let herself fall into his arms. And though fear still gnawed at her heart, she knew one truth. She didn't want to face this storm without him. The storm reached its peak one crisp morning when Kaiden received an ultimatum. The board had convened without him and voted either he end his relationship with Margaret, or they would move to strip him of his position as CEO. It was everything Kaiden had built his empire, its legacy hanging in the balance. That evening, he sat in his office, staring at the skyline. The city lights glittered like a million temptations, each one a reminder of what he had fought for all his life. Yet for the first time, the thought of losing it didn't terrify him. What terrified him was the image of Margaret, alone and broken. If he chose power over her, he made his decision. The next day, reporters swarmed as Kaiden called another press conference. Margaret begged him not to. "Please, Kaiden, you'll lose everything." He shook his head, his eyes steady. "I'll only lose what never mattered, but I won't lose you." Before the world, Kaiden stood tall, his voice unwavering. "To my shareholders, to my family, to everyone who questions me, I will not step down from Margaret. If that means I step down from this company, so be it. I founded this empire to build something lasting. But what's the point of building a kingdom if you have no one to share it with?" The room exploded with questions, but Kaiden didn't stay. He walked off the stage, leaving behind the chaos, the flashing cameras, and perhaps his title. When he reached Margaret's apartment that night, she ran into his arms, tears streaming. "You gave it all up for me." He held her tightly. "Titles, companies, wealth, they can all vanish tomorrow. But love like this, it doesn't come twice. And I'd be a fool to trade it for anything." Margaret clung to him, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and awe. For so long, she had doubted, feared she was just a temporary escape. But this sacrifice was undeniable proof. "I love you," she whispered, her voice trembling. But certain, Kaiden pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you. More than any empire, more than any legacy. You are my choice. Always." Months later, though Kaiden no longer sat at the head of the boardroom, he found himself freer than ever. He started smaller ventures, projects he actually enjoyed. Margaret was always by his side. The world still whispered, but their voices no longer mattered. On quiet evenings, when Margaret traced the little star pendant on her bracelet, she remembered the girl she once was, hungry, desperate, lost. And she smiled because she was no longer that girl. She was the woman who had been chosen, not for power, not for appearances, but for love, and in Kaiden's arms under the same stars. Where they had shared their first kiss, she finally believed it was true.